I sat at the corner table of Blackstone Prime, watching my mother order her third glass of wine while my stepfather Gary pointed at the tomahawk steak on the menu. My stepsister Brittany laughed as she added truffle butter to her Chilean sea bass, and my stepbrother Kyle was already working on his second appetizer. When the waiter brought the check, my mother announced loudly that I was their family sponsor tonight. Everyone laughed. The total was $1,900. I excused myself for a phone call, walked outside into the cool evening air, got into my car, and drove away. 3 weeks before that night, I was sitting in my apartment in the city when my phone rang. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. Mom. We had not spoken properly in almost 2 years. Just occasional text messages on birthdays and holidays. Brief, polite, empty. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Her voice was warm, almost syrupy sweet. She asked how I was doing, how work was going, if I was eating well. Small talk that felt strange coming from her after so long. Then she got to the point. She wanted to reconnect. She said she had been thinking about our relationship and realized how distant we had become. She missed me. She wanted to make things right. I held the phone tightly, feeling that old familiar hope rising in my chest. The hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. My mother and father divorced when I was 12. It was messy and painful, the kind of divorce that leaves scars on everyone involved. 8 months later, she married Gary. He came with 2 children from his previous marriage. Brittany was 14 then, and Kyle was 12, the same age as me. From the moment they moved into our house, everything changed. I became invisible. My mother suddenly had a ready-made family that did not include the daughter she already had. Brittany got the bigger bedroom. Kyle got help with his homework at the kitchen table while I did mine alone in my room. When I asked for new shoes because mine had holes, my mother said we needed to watch our spending. The next week, Brittany got a complete wardrobe refresh for the new school year. I learned quickly not to ask for things. I got a job at 15, babysitting for neighbors. At 16, I worked at a coffee shop before school. My mother praised me for being so independent, so mature, so unlike other teenagers who constantly needed their parents. What she really meant was that I was convenient. I did not require attention or money or time. I raised myself while she focused on keeping her new husband happy and his children comfortable. When I graduated high school, there was no money saved for my college. Gary and my mother had used their savings to buy Kyle a car for his 16th birthday. A nice car. A brand new sedan with all the features. Meanwhile, I took out student loans and worked 3 jobs to put myself through community college, then transferred to a state university. Brittany got her college paid for. Full tuition, room and board, spending money. She dropped out after 2 years because she said it was not for her. Kyle got 4 years paid, barely scraped by with passing grades, and graduated with a degree he never used. I graduated with honors and $30,000 in debt. At 22, I moved 4 hours away to the city. I got an entry-level job in marketing, lived in a tiny studio apartment, and slowly, painfully, built a life for myself. I climbed the corporate ladder through sheer determination. I made friends. I created a world where I mattered, where my efforts were recognized, where I was valued. My mother called occasionally, usually when she needed something. Could I send money for Christmas gifts? Could I help Brittany with her rent one month? Could I look at Kyle's resume because he was job hunting again? I usually said yes because I still wanted her approval. I still wanted to be a good daughter. But this phone call felt different. She sounded genuine. She said she had been talking to her sister, my Aunt Paula, who had made her realize how unfairly she had treated me growing up. She said she wanted to celebrate my recent promotion. I had been made a marketing coordinator at my company, a significant step up with a salary increase I had worked incredibly hard to earn. She suggested a family dinner, all of us together, a fresh start. I wanted to believe her so badly that I ignored the small voice in my head warning me to be careful. She insisted on Blackstone Prime, the fanciest steakhouse in our hometown. I hesitated. That place was expensive, the kind of restaurant where entrees started at $40. She laughed and said it was a celebration and we would all split the bill. It would be fine. I agreed to drive home the following weekend. When I arrived at the restaurant that Saturday evening, I saw them already seated at a large round table near the window. My mother waved enthusiastically. Gary barely looked up from his phone. Brittany was taking selfies with the elegant decor behind her. Kyle was scrolling through something on his screen. I walked over, feeling suddenly overdressed in the nice blouse and slacks I had chosen. My mother stood and hugged me, the kind of hug that felt performative, like she was aware people might be watching. Gary grunted a greeting. Brittany said I looked tired. Kyle did not acknowledge me at all. We sat down and the waiter brought menus. Beautiful, leather-bound menus with gold lettering. I opened mine and felt my throat tighten. The prices were even higher than I remembered. The cheapest entree was $42. Most were $60 to $80. The steaks ranged up to $130. Brittany immediately started complaining about her job at a boutique downtown. She said her boss was mean, the hours were terrible, and the pay was barely enough to cover her expenses. She was practically broke. Kyle mentioned casually that he had quit his job 3 weeks ago, his third job this year. The manager had been rude to him, he said, so he just walked out. He was looking for something better. Gary said nothing, just kept scrolling on his phone. I felt the first flutter of anxiety in my stomach. If everyone was struggling financially, why were we at such an expensive restaurant? I suggested gently that maybe we could go somewhere more affordable. There was a great Italian place down the street, with reasonable prices and really good food. My mother waved her hand dismissively. She said this was a special occasion and we should enjoy ourselves. Then she looked at me with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She said I had just gotten that big promotion. I could afford to treat my family for once. After all, they had raised me. The words hung in the air. The waiter approached to take drink orders. My mother ordered a glass of expensive wine. Gary ordered a craft beer. Brittany wanted a specialty cocktail. Kyle ordered 2 different drinks to try. I ordered water. My mother frowned at me and said I was being no fun. I changed my order to iced tea. The waiter left, and I sat there feeling the weight of what was happening. This was not a celebration. This was not about reconnecting. I was here to pay. When the waiter returned to take our dinner orders, I watched in growing horror as my family ordered without even glancing at the prices. Gary went first. He ordered the 48-ounce tomahawk steak, the most expensive item on the menu at $130. He added the lobster mac and cheese side for an additional $18, and the grilled asparagus with hollandaise for $15. Brittany studied the menu like she was reading a novel, taking her time. She finally decided on the Chilean sea base at $75. Then she added 3 premium sides. Truffle mashed potatoes for $14. Roasted Brussels sprouts with bacon for $13, and the creamed spinach for $12. She also requested extra truffle butter on everything. Kyle ordered the shrimp cocktail appetizer for $22 and the calamari for $19, both just for himself. Then he got the surf and turf, combining the filet mignon and lobster tail, for $98. He asked for the loaded baked potato and the Caesar salad as his sides. My mother ordered the chef's tasting menu, a 5-course experience that came with wine pairings, $140. When the waiter turned to me, I had been planning to order the herb-roasted chicken, one of the more affordable options, at $42. But before I could speak, my mother interrupted. She told me not to be cheap. This was a celebration, she said. Stop being so uptight about money. Order something good. Everyone was looking at me. The waiter stood with his pen poised over his notepad, waiting. I changed my order to the salmon at $58 with a simple side salad. Gary said nothing, just kept scrolling on his phone. As the waiter walked away, The conversation at the table shifted. Brittany launched into a detailed story about her recent vacation to Miami. She had gone with friends for a long weekend, staying at a beachfront hotel and going to clubs every night. She showed us pictures on her phone. The whole trip must have cost thousands. I asked how she afforded it if she was barely making rent. She shrugged and said she just put it on her credit card. Life was short. You had to enjoy yourself. Kyle talked about needing a new car. His current one was old and kept having problems. He was looking at trucks, something with four-wheel drive. He showed Gary pictures of vehicles that cost $40,000 or more. Gary said, "That sounded reasonable. A man needed a good truck." I thought about my own car, a used sedan I had bought 3 years ago and meticulously maintained. It had 120,000 miles on it, but it ran perfectly because I took care of it and stayed on top of maintenance. My mother sighed dramatically. She said, "Life was so expensive these days. Gary's hours at work had been cut. They were barely getting by. The mortgage was a struggle. The utilities kept going up." She looked at me when she said this. A pointed look. Then she pivoted. She said I had always been so independent, even as a child. I never needed them. I just figured everything out on my own. I felt anger flash through me, hot and sudden. I had not been independent by choice. I had been neglected. But I swallowed the words before they could come out. Instead, I said quietly that I had needed them. They just were not available. My mother laughed, a light tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. She said I was being too sensitive. She had done her best, being a single mother after the divorce had been hard. She had not been single. She had remarried 8 months later, but I said nothing. Gary finally looked up from his phone. He said my mother had sacrificed a lot raising me alone before he came into the picture. The least I could do was show some gratitude. Brittany nodded enthusiastically. She said I should not be so selfish. We were family. Family helped each other. Kyle smirked and said something under his breath. I did not catch all of it, but I heard the words wallet and sponsor. The waiter arrived with our drinks and appetizers. Kyle immediately dug into both of his starters, not offering to share despite ordering enough food for 3 people. My mother raised her wine glass and proposed a toast. To family, she said. To second chances. To Cheryl's success. Everyone clinked glasses. I lifted my iced tea and touched it to theirs, feeling hollow. The meal continued. Course after course arrived. The food was beautiful, perfectly prepared. Exactly the kind of high-end cuisine this restaurant was known for. But I could barely taste it. Every bite felt like ash in my mouth. My mother talked about how proud she was of me, how far I had come. But her words felt empty, performative. She was saying what she thought she should say, not what she actually felt. Gary and Kyle discussed sports. Brittany scrolled through social media on her phone, occasionally showing my mother funny videos. I was at the table, but I was not part of the family. I never had been. The waiter kept bringing additional items that Gary and Kyle ordered. An extra appetizer, premium cocktails. Kyle ordered a second entree, a rack of lamb, because he wanted to try it. Gary ordered a bottle of wine to share with my mother. I watched the invisible bill growing in my mind. We were easily past $1,000, probably approaching $1,500. My mother patted my hand across the table. She said it was so wonderful to have everyone together. She had missed this. We had never had this. Not once in my entire life had I felt included in this family unit. Then my mother did something that made my blood run cold. She stood up, slightly unsteady from the wine. She raised her glass and spoke loudly enough for the tables around us to hear. She announced to the entire section of the restaurant that her daughter Cheryl had just gotten a huge promotion and was now making 6 figures. Tonight, she declared, Cheryl was treating the whole family. She asked everyone to give me a round of applause for being so successful and generous. People at nearby tables actually clapped. Some smiled at me. A few raised their glasses in my direction. I sat frozen in my chair, my face burning with humiliation. I was not making six figures. My promotion had been significant, but I was making $68,000 a year. Good money, yes, but not six figures. And I had never agreed to pay for this dinner. My mother sat back down, looking pleased with herself. Gary nodded approvingly. Brittany said it was about time I did something nice for the family. Kyle called over the waiter and ordered dessert for everyone, including the chocolate lava cake that cost $16 and the chef's special ice cream flight at $22. I tried to speak. I opened my mouth to object, to say that this was not what we had agreed to, that I could not afford to pay for all of this. But the words would not come. My throat was tight. My hands were shaking. I felt trapped, backed into a corner with no way out. The waiter brought the dessert menu. My mother was already pointing at items she wanted to try. Gary wanted coffee, the premium blend at $8 a cup. Kyle was debating between 3 different desserts. I excused myself from the table, saying I needed to use the restroom. My mother barely glanced at me. She just waved her hand and went back to studying the dessert menu. I walked past the restrooms, through the restaurant, toward the front entrance. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The waiter intercepted me near the host stand. He had the check in a leather folder. He asked if I was ready to take care of it. I took the folder with trembling hands. I opened it. $1,900.17. The waiter kept bringing additional items that Gary and Kyle ordered. An extra appetizer, premium cocktails. Kyle ordered a second entree, a rack of lamb, because he wanted to try it. Gary ordered a bottle of wine to share with my mother. I thought about my carefully planned budget. My student loan payments, my rent, the down payment I was saving for a condo, my emergency fund that I had built dollar by dollar. $1,900 would devastate my finances for months. I looked back toward our table. Gary was showing Kyle something on his phone, both of them laughing. Brittany was taking more selfies. My mother was sipping her wine, looking content and relaxed. None of them were thinking about me. None of them cared that I was struggling with this massive bill. None of them had even considered that maybe, just maybe, this was too much to ask. I walked back to the table slowly. When I arrived, I placed the closed leather folder in the center of the table. I told them I needed to take a work call outside. An emergency. It would just take a few minutes. My mother barely looked up. She waved her hand dismissively and said to make it quick. They wanted to order after dinner drinks. Maybe some port or dessert wine. I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Brittany laugh. Her voice carried across the restaurant. She said I was so dramatic. Just pay the bill already. I pushed through the heavy wooden door and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The parking lot was half full, cars gleaming under the decorative streetlights that gave the area an upscale ambiance. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, just breathing. My phone was in my hand, but I was not making any call. There was no work emergency. There was nothing pulling me back inside except obligation and guilt. I looked through the large windows of the restaurant. I could see our table clearly from where I stood. My family was animated, happy, completely at ease. They had already ordered the after-dinner drinks. The waiter was bringing them on a tray. They looked like they belonged there, in that expensive restaurant with its white tablecloths and crystal glasses. They looked comfortable in a way I had never felt. Not in that restaurant, not in their presence, not anywhere in my entire childhood. My mind drifted back through the years. I thought about being 13 and having to wear Brittany's hand-me-down clothes to school while she got new outfits every season. I thought about my 15th birthday when my mother forgot completely because she was planning Brittany's sweet 16 party. I thought about working 40 hours a week while taking a full course load in college, coming home exhausted to my tiny apartment, eating ramen for the 4th night in a row because it was all I could afford. I thought about calling my mother when I got my first real job after graduation, excited to share the news, only to have her ask if I could now start helping Kyle with his car insurance payments. Every memory was the same pattern. I gave and gave and gave, and they took and took and took. And when I had nothing left to give, I was the selfish one. I was the ungrateful one. I was the one who did not understand what family meant. My phone buzzed in my hand. A call from my mother. I stared at the screen as it rang, then declined it. Immediately, a text message came through. "Where are you? Stop being rude and come back inside." Another buzz. This time from Gary's number. "Your mother is waiting. Get back in here." Then Brittany. "Are you seriously leaving us here? This is so typical of you." I stood there reading the messages, feeling something shift inside me. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Something clearer. Clarity. I had spent my entire adult life trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. I had twisted myself into shapes I did not recognize, trying to be good enough, helpful enough, generous enough, and it was never enough, because the problem was not me. It had never been me. The problem was that they saw me as a resource, not a person. They saw me as a solution to their problems, not as someone with my own needs and dreams and struggles. And I had let them. I had participated in my own diminishment, because I was so desperate to belong. But I did not belong with them. I never had. I walked to my car, parked 3 rows back. My hands were steady now, as I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. The interior still smelled like the vanilla air freshener I had hung from the rearview mirror. Everything was exactly as I had left it 2 hours ago, but I felt like a completely different person. My phone started ringing again. My mother. I declined it. Another text from Gary. This one was angrier. "You better get back in here right now and take care of this bill. We are not paying for this." I sat in my car with the engine off, staring at the messages coming in one after another. From my mother. "I cannot believe you would do this to your family after everything we have done for you." From Brittany. "You are so selfish. I knew you had not really changed." From Kyle. Classic Cheryl. Always has to make everything about her. I read each message carefully. I let the words sink in. I waited to feel the guilt that usually came, the overwhelming need to fix things, to make everyone else comfortable even at the cost of my own well-being. But it did not come. Instead, I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace, certainty, the deep, bone-level knowledge that I was doing the right thing. I started my car. The engine hummed to life. My phone was ringing again, but I put it in the cup holder without looking at who was calling. I pulled out of the parking space slowly, carefully. I drove past the restaurant windows one more time. I could see the waiter standing at our table, probably asking about payment. I could see my mother gesturing frantically. Gary was standing up, his face red even from this distance. My mother sighed dramatically. She said life was so expensive these days. Gary's hours at work had been cut. They were barely getting by. The mortgage was a struggle. The utilities kept going up. At the parking lot exit, I stopped. My hands were on the steering wheel. I could turn right and head toward the highway that would take me home to the city. Or I could turn left and go back. My phone buzzed with another message. Then another. The sound was constant now, a steady stream of calls and texts. I picked up my phone. I opened a new group message and added all 4 of them. My mother, Gary, Brittany, and Kyle. I typed carefully, making sure every word was exactly what I meant to say. I am not paying that bill. You ordered it, you pay for it. You have all made it very clear I am not really family, just a wallet. Consider this my resignation from that position. Do not contact me again. I hit send. Then, one by one, I blocked all 4 numbers. I set my phone down, took a deep breath, and turned right toward the highway. The drive back to the city took 4 hours. I drove in complete silence. No music, no podcasts, just the sound of my car on the highway and my own thoughts. Around the 2-hour mark, I pulled over at a rest stop. I sat in my car and allowed myself to feel everything I had been holding back. The hurt, the anger, the grief for the family I had always wanted but never had. I cried for 20 minutes in that parking lot, big gulping sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. I cried for the little girl who had tried so hard to be good enough. I cried for the teenager who had worked herself to exhaustion trying to prove her worth. I cried for the young woman who had given and given and given, hoping that eventually it would be reciprocated. When the tears finally stopped, I felt empty, but also lighter, like I had been carrying a weight for so long that I had forgotten it was there, and now it was gone. I drove the rest of the way home in that strange, peaceful emptiness. I got to my apartment building just after midnight. The city was quiet, just a few cars on the street, a couple walking home from a late dinner. I parked in my usual spot and sat for a moment before going inside. What had I just done? I had walked away from my family. I had left them with a bill they could not pay. I had blocked their numbers. I had said things that could not be unsaid. The old me would have been panicking by now, would have already unblocked the numbers and called to apologize, would have found a way to fix it even if it meant emptying my savings account. But I did not want to fix it. For the first time in my life, I did not want to be the one who made everything okay for everyone else. I went upstairs to my apartment, a small, one-bedroom on the 3rd floor. It was not fancy, but it was mine. I had furnished it carefully over the years, choosing each piece, making it a space that felt safe and comfortable. I changed into pajamas, washed my face, and got into bed. I expected to lie awake all night, my mind racing. But instead, I fell asleep almost immediately. I woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. For a few peaceful seconds, I forgot about the night before. Then it all came rushing back. I reached for my phone on my nightstand. I had dozens of notifications. I unblocked the numbers temporarily, just to see what had been said. The messages were vicious. My mother called me every terrible name she could think of. Gary threatened to ruin my reputation. Brittany said I was dead to her. Kyle sent a string of messages that were so cruel I could not read them all. But there were other messages too, from numbers I did not immediately recognize. I scrolled through them and realized they were from extended family members. Apparently, word had spread quickly. My Aunt Paula had sent several messages asking if I was okay and saying she wanted to talk. My cousin Jennifer had sent a long message saying she had always seen how differently I was treated, and she was proud of me for standing up for myself. But there were also messages from relatives who believed my mother's version of events. They called me ungrateful and selfish. They said I had humiliated my family. They said I should be ashamed. I reblocked my mother, Gary, Brittany, and Kyle. Then I got up and made coffee. I spent the day cleaning my apartment, doing laundry, meal prepping for the week, normal Sunday activities. I tried to focus on the mundane tasks, but my mind kept drifting back to the restaurant. Had I overreacted? Should I have just paid the bill and dealt with it later? Was I being too harsh? But every time I started to second-guess myself, I remembered the look on my mother's face when she announced to the restaurant that I was paying. The complete lack of concern for how I might feel, or whether I could afford it. The assumption that my money was their money. I thought about my carefully planned budget, my student loan payments, my rent, the down payment I was saving for a condo, my emergency fund that I had built dollar by dollar. $1,900 would devastate my finances for months. She answered on the second ring. We talked for over an hour. She told me what had happened after I left. My mother had called her in a panic, begging her to come to the restaurant and help with the bill. Paula had gone, not to help my mother, but to make sure the restaurant did not call the police. She had paid half the bill, about $950, to avoid a scene. Gary had to use 3 different credit cards to cover the rest because none of them had enough credit on a single card. Paula told me she had given my mother a piece of her mind right there in the restaurant parking lot. She said she was done watching my mother use me. She said she should have spoken up years ago. Then Paula told me something I had not known. My mother had been doing this kind of thing for years, not just to me, but to other people too. She had borrowed money from Paula and never paid it back. She had manipulated other family members into paying for things. It was a pattern. Paula encouraged me to hold my boundary. She said it would be hard, but it was necessary. That conversation gave me strength. Just knowing that someone saw what was happening, that I was not crazy or overreacting, made an enormous difference. Over the next few days, I heard from a few more cousins. Some supported me. Others thought I had been too extreme. I learned quickly who actually cared about me and who just wanted to maintain the illusion of family harmony at any cost. Work was a welcome distraction. I threw myself into my projects, grateful for something productive to focus on. On Wednesday, my boss Amanda called me into her office. I felt a flash of panic. Had my mother somehow contacted my workplace? Was this going to affect my job? But Amanda just wanted to check in. She said I seemed distracted and asked if everything was okay. I hesitated, then gave her a very brief overview. I did not go into details, just said I had a difficult situation with family members who had expected me to pay for an expensive dinner without asking first, and I had declined. Amanda was quiet for a moment. Then she shared her own story. 10 years ago, she had cut off contact with her father and stepmother for similar reasons. They had treated her like a bank account, constantly asking for money, making her feel guilty when she said no. She told me it was one of the hardest things she had ever done, but also one of the best. She said the people who truly love you will never make you feel like an ATM machine. She said I had done the right thing. Hearing that from someone I respected so much, someone successful and put together, someone whose judgment I trusted, meant everything. That validation cemented my decision. I was not going back. I was not apologizing. I was not fixing this. I was finally, for the first time in my life, putting myself first. 2 weeks passed. The messages from my mother became less frequent, though she tried calling from different numbers. I never answered. She sent emails with subject lines designed to make me feel guilty. How could you do this? Your father would be ashamed. We are struggling because of you. That last one made me angry. My biological father had died when I was 7 years old. He had been a kind man, gentle and loving. My mother using his memory to manipulate me felt like a new low. I did not respond to any of it. Then, a letter arrived at my workplace. It was in a cream-colored envelope, my name written in my mother's distinctive handwriting. Someone from the mailroom brought it up to my desk. I stared at it for a long time, before opening it. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten on matching cream stationery. My mother's words sprawled across the pages, some parts pressed so hard the pen had nearly torn through the paper. She started with guilt. How could I abandon my family? Did I not understand how much they were struggling? Gary had been laid off from his job. Brittany had been evicted from her apartment and had to move back home. Kyle had wrecked his car and had no way to get to job interviews. Everything was falling apart, and it was all because I had refused to help. Then she shifted to sentimentality. She wrote about when I was a baby, how she had loved me, how hard it had been to raise me alone after my father died. She wrote about sacrifices she had made, though she did not specify what those sacrifices were. She ended with a plea. She needed help. They all needed help. I was the only one who could fix this. Please, could I just send some money? Even a few $1,000s would make such a difference. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. I felt the old pull of obligation. These were real problems. Gary being laid off was serious. Brittany being evicted was scary. Kyle needing a car was a legitimate issue. But none of these problems were my responsibility. And more importantly, none of these problems had been caused by me not paying that dinner bill. These were consequences of their own choices and circumstances. I scheduled an appointment with a therapist. I had been thinking about it since the restaurant incident, and the letter pushed me to actually do it. Her name was Dr. Sarah Bennett. She had kind eyes and a calm presence. I told her everything. My childhood, the divorce, the remarriage, the years of feeling invisible, the restaurant, the letter. Dr. Bennett listened without judgment. Then she helped me see the patterns clearly. My mother only reached out when she needed something. The relationship was completely one-sided. I gave, and she took, and then when I stopped giving, she framed me as the villain. Dr. Bennett asked me a question that changed everything. She asked what I wanted from these relationships. Not what they wanted from me. What did I want? I realized I did not know. I had spent so long trying to earn their love that I had never stopped to ask if I even wanted a relationship with people who treated me this way. I went home that night and wrote a letter of my own. Not to send, just for myself. A letter saying everything I had never been able to say growing up. I wrote about feeling invisible. About watching my mother dote on my step-siblings while ignoring me. About working so hard to pay for college while they got everything handed to them. About the constant message that I was not worth investing in. I wrote about the pain of always being an afterthought. About the loneliness of growing up in a house full of people but feeling completely alone. I wrote until my hand cramped, filling page after page. When I was done, I felt exhausted, but clearer. I did not send the letter. It was not for them. It was for me, a way to process and release decades of hurt. Life started to settle into a new normal. I focused on work. I had been assigned a major project, redesigning our company's entire social media strategy. It was high profile and challenging, exactly the kind of work I thrived on. I started going to a yoga class on Tuesday evenings. The instructor was a woman named Tara, probably in her mid-30s, with long auburn hair and a perpetually calm demeanor. After the third class, she invited me to get coffee. We went to a little cafe down the street from the yoga studio. Tara was easy to talk to, the kind of person who listened fully without trying to fix everything. I told her a little about my family situation. She shared that she had gone through something similar with her brother, who had been financially dependent on her for years before she finally cut him off. We became friends. Real friends, not the superficial kind I had maintained over the years. She introduced me to her circle, other women who were genuine and kind. For the first time, I felt like I was building the kind of community I had always wanted. Aunt Paula and I started having lunch once a month. She would drive to the city, and we would meet at different restaurants. She told me stories about my father, things I had not known. She said I was more like him than I realized. Stubborn in the best way, she said, principled, unwilling to compromise my values. My cousins Jennifer and Marcus reached out regularly. We created a group chat, just the three of us, where we shared memes and made plans. They were younger than me, both in their early 20s, but we connected in a way I had never connected with Brittany or Kyle. I felt like I was finally building a life that was authentically mine, not one constructed around other people's expectations. 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, I put the money I would have spent on that dinner into my savings account, $1,900. Watching my savings balance increase felt powerful, a tangible reminder that I was investing in my own future instead of pouring resources into a bottomless pit of other people's needs. I was healing, slowly but surely. One evening in early November, about 6 weeks after the restaurant incident, I was getting ready for bed when my apartment buzzer rang. It was after 9 o'clock. I was not expecting anyone. I pressed the intercom button. The voice on the other end was female and familiar. It was Brittany. She said she needed to talk to me. She sounded different, not angry or demanding, almost nervous. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to ignore her, to not engage, to protect the peace I had worked so hard to build. But curiosity got the better of me. I told her I would come down to the lobby, but she could not come up to my apartment. I threw on a sweatshirt over my pajamas and took the elevator down. The lobby was small, just a few chairs and a table with some old magazines. Brittany was standing near the door, looking out at the street. She turned when she heard me approach. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing sweatpants and an oversized jacket. Her eyes were red and puffy. We stood there looking at each other for a long moment. She spoke first. She said Mom had sent her. She was supposed to try to convince me to come back, to apologize, to start helping the family again financially. I waited, saying nothing. Then Brittany did something unexpected. She started crying. She said she could not do it anymore. She was so tired. Tired of the manipulation, tired of the constant drama, tired of pretending everything was fine when it was not. She told me that after I left the restaurant, things had gotten worse. Gary blamed my mother for the whole thing. He said if she had not been so greedy with the ordering, it would not have been such an expensive bill. They fought constantly. He was drinking more. The house was tense and miserable. My mother had become obsessed with getting me to come back. Not because she missed me, Brittany said, but because she needed the money. With Gary laid off, they were barely making ends meet. She had been counting on me to become a regular source of financial support. Brittany said she had been evicted not because she could not pay rent, but because she had stopped paying rent months ago, spending the money on other things instead. Our mother had been covering some of her bills, expecting me to eventually take over. Kyle had wrecked his car while driving drunk. He was lucky he had not hurt anyone. But now he had legal fees on top of needing a new vehicle. Everything was falling apart. And my mother was spiraling, calling me names, insisting I was the source of all their problems. Brittany said she had finally seen it clearly. Our mother was toxic. She used people. She pitted us against each other. She created chaos and then blamed everyone else for it. Brittany looked at me with tears streaming down her face. She said I was right to leave. She said she was sorry for how she had treated me growing up. She said she was sorry for the restaurant. She said she was sorry for all of it. I stood there absorbing her words. Part of me wanted to hug her, to comfort her, to fall back into the old pattern of taking care of everyone. But another part of me, the stronger part, knew that Brittany had to make her own choices. I could not save her. She had to save herself. I told her I appreciated her apology. I told her I forgave her. But I also told her that I was not coming back. I was not resuming contact with our mother, or Gary, or Kyle. I was not providing money. I was not fixing their problems. I told her she had to decide for herself what she was going to do. She could stay in that toxic environment, or she could leave. But it was her choice to make. She nodded slowly. She asked if we could maybe talk sometime, just the two of us, without the rest of the family. I told her I needed to think about it. I was not ready to have her back in my life yet. Maybe someday, if she did the work to become a healthier person. But not now. She accepted that. She hugged me quickly, then left. I went back upstairs, feeling shaken. I had not expected that conversation. I had not expected Brittany to show any self-awareness or accountability. I called Dr. Bennett the next day, and we had an emergency session. She helped me process what had happened. She reminded me that people apologizing does not mean I owe them forgiveness or reconciliation. She said I had handled it perfectly by being honest about my boundaries. Over the next few weeks, I heard through Aunt Paula that Brittany had moved out of my mother's house. She had found a roommate and was getting her life together, going to therapy, working on herself. I was glad for her, but I maintained my distance. Maybe one day we could have a relationship, but it would have to be a completely different kind of relationship than what we had before. Kyle apparently moved back in with his biological mother in another state. Gary and my mother were still together, but barely. The marriage was hanging by a thread. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles. I just felt removed from it all, like it was a story about people I used to know. My life continued to blossom. At work, my social media project was a huge success. The company saw a 40% increase in engagement within the first month of implementing my strategy. My boss praised me publicly in a company meeting and hinted at another promotion in the near future. I started dating someone. His name was Aaron, and he worked in the accounting department. We had met in the break room one day, bonded over our mutual love of terrible reality TV shows. He was kind and funny and steady. He had a good relationship with his family, which was both wonderful and sometimes painful to witness, but he was patient with me as I processed my own family trauma. I went on a weekend trip to the coast with Tara and some of her friends. We stayed in a little beach cottage, walked on the sand, ate fresh seafood, laughed until our sides hurt. It was the kind of carefree, joyful experience I had never had growing up. I was building a life I loved, a life that was mine, a life where I was valued and appreciated for who I was, not what I could provide. Thanksgiving arrived. In previous years, I would have driven home, helped cook the meal, cleaned up afterward, and probably given my mother money to cover the cost of feeding everyone. This year, I stayed in the city. I invited Aunt Paula, my cousins Jennifer and Marcus, and Tara to my apartment for dinner. It was small, just 5 of us, but it felt perfect. We cooked together, everyone contributing a dish. Paula made her famous green bean casserole. Jennifer brought homemade rolls. Marcus made a pecan pie from scratch. Tara provided an elaborate cheese board. I roasted the turkey, my first time ever making one, and it turned out surprisingly well. We sat around my small dining table, which I had extended with a folding table to fit everyone. The apartment was warm from the oven, smelling like sage and butter and cinnamon. Before we ate, I suggested we go around the table and share what we were grateful for. Paula went first. She said she was grateful for family, real family, the kind that shows up and supports each other genuinely. She squeezed my hand as she said it. Jennifer said she was grateful for honest people who inspire her to be braver. She looked at me when she said it. Marcus said he was grateful for second chances and fresh starts. Tara said she was grateful for new friendships and found family. Then it was my turn. I felt emotion rising in my throat. I took a breath before speaking. I said I was grateful for learning that family is not just about blood. It is about who shows up for you, who sees you, who values you for who you are, not what you can do for them. I said I was grateful for finding the courage to walk away from people who did not appreciate me and for finding people who did. I said I was grateful for learning that saying no to being used is actually saying yes to myself. My voice cracked a little on the last part. Paula reached over and squeezed my hand again. We ate and talked and laughed. It was the best Thanksgiving I had ever had. After everyone left, I sat on my small balcony with a cup of tea, wrapped in a blanket against the November chill. The city lights stretched out before me, thousands of windows glowing in the darkness. I thought about my mother and Gary and Brittany and Kyle. I wondered what their Thanksgiving had been like. Part of me hoped they were doing okay, but mostly I felt neutral about it. Their struggles were not my responsibility. I thought about the woman I had been 6 months ago, so desperate for approval, so willing to sacrifice herself for scraps of affection, so convinced that if she just gave enough, did enough, bent enough, she would finally be loved the way she needed. That woman felt like a stranger to me now. I pulled out my journal, a new habit I had developed in therapy. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, I used to think being a good daughter meant sacrificing myself. Now I know being a good person means honoring my worth. The most expensive meal I ever did not pay for taught me the most valuable lesson. I am not anyone's wallet. I am not anyone's backup plan. I am enough, exactly as I am. I sat with those words for a long time. My phone buzzed. A text from Aaron asking about my day. I smiled and responded, telling him about the dinner, about how good it felt to be surrounded by people who genuinely cared. He sent back a heart emoji and asked if I wanted to get breakfast the next morning. I said yes. The future stretched out before me, full of possibility. There would be hard days, I knew that. There would be moments when I questioned my choices, when the old guilt tried to creep back in. But I also knew I had the tools now to handle those moments. I had therapy. I had genuine friends. I had self-respect. I had walked away from that restaurant 6 weeks ago feeling terrified and uncertain. Now I felt strong. I felt clear. I felt free. True family relationships are built on mutual respect and love, not obligation and manipulation. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is essential for survival. You teach people how to treat you, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from those who refuse to see your value. Your worth is not determined by what you can provide for others. Your worth is inherent, unchangeable, yours simply because you exist. And sometimes, the family you choose is more real, more supportive, more life-giving than the family you were born into. I learned all of this because I had the courage to say no, to walk out of that restaurant, to block those numbers, to refuse to participate in my own diminishment any longer. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. It was also the best thing I had ever done. I finished my tea and went back inside. Tomorrow was a new day. I had breakfast plans with someone who treated me with kindness. I had a job I loved. I had friends who valued me. I had an aunt and cousins who showed up. I had myself. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were giving everything to people who only saw you as a resource? Have you ever had to walk away from family because staying was destroying you? How did you find the courage to put yourself first? Share your stories in the comments. I read every single one, and your experiences help others who are going through similar situations feel less alone. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps more people find these stories and know they are not alone in their struggles. And if you want to hear more stories about finding strength, setting boundaries, and choosing yourself, please subscribe to the channel. I share new stories every week. Also, if you know someone who needs to hear this message, someone who is struggling with toxic family dynamics or feeling guilty about setting boundaries, please share this video with them. Sometimes we need to hear from others who have walked this path to know that it is okay to choose our own well-being. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope you know that you are worthy of respect, of genuine love, of relationships that uplift you instead of draining you. I hope you have the courage to walk away from anything that makes you feel small. And I hope you find your people, your real family, the ones who see you and value you for exactly who you are. Take care of yourself. You deserve it.